ファイナルクローズ。じゃあ力を
Also, the very expensive price point. I believe that launched at $399 versus $299. The
Final close.
And then I have very PlayStation goes beyond even Sony's expectations. People still walking further up if I keep wanting it. The PlayStation has changed the world of gaming as we know it.
Sony had not brought hardware to the video game industry, I think the industry would be a lot smaller than it is right now. Before the original PlayStation came out, the media perception of the video game business was that it's basically a toy for kids. We saw the PlayStation as not really a platform of entertainment for kids, but really an interactive entertainment platform for everybody.
Sony revolutionized the industry with PlayStation. It's that simple. They started off as an underdog, and in years, that means they own over half the market, and that's incredible.
There are now over 35 million PlayStation 1 in the US. And I think for many PlayStation remains number one. The PlayStation successor, the PlayStation 2, has shipped more than 90 million worldwide, and it's still the one strong. Sony is portable gaming market, while the next generation PlayStation
I have the title and the biggest announcement. Can't argue the man that's like years in advance plotted out in his head and amazing vision of where he wants video games to go. Ken is the new father of PlayStation.
He always believed PlayStation was number one.
Final close. Divide. フ ウィナーワーグナー
Y'all watch some of them old YouTube videos, they was whooping on me.
Final close ディバイド
すべが駆け前反撃逆バラ逆バラ落ちるここだ舞い上がれ火を出す焚き塞がるものは全て焼き払うそれだ
ワーグナー
Plotted out in his head and has an amazing vision of where he wants video games to go.
Always really hard PlayStation. Always believe PlayStation will be number one.
ファイナルクローズディバイド
で行くぜそら
On this episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly TV, we take a look back at the history behind and launch of one of the greatest game consoles of all time, the Sony PlayStation.
Final close ディバイド行くよ
I was 18 years old when the PlayStation was launched in 1995, and it was the first video game console that I was able to buy and experience as a working adult. But I would read video game magazines, follow previews, and actually buy the games before they came out. For this reason, the nostalgic feeling I have for the PlayStation is a little bit different than the one I have when I think about the NES or the Genesis. And the Sony PlayStation is definitely one of my all-time favorite video games. So now that I play with you, let's take a look at it and the games that launched with it on September 9th, 1995. In 1947, Masaru Ibuka and Akio Morita founded Tokyo Telecommunications Engineering Corporation and built Japan's first tape recorder, the TTK Type G. Ibuka and Morita wanted to change the name of their company to something more marketable, and in 1958 officially
This is the history.
changed the name to Sony and began manufacturing small handheld radios using then new transistor technology. Radios like the TR-55 and TR-63 sold like hotcakes in the quickly expanding American market, giving Sony their first real presence here. Sony would go on to become an industry leader in product development, and their name would become synonymous with the highest quality products on the electronics market, helping to reverse the pre-war image held by products manufactured in Japan. The PlayStation can trace its origins back to 1988, when Ken Kutaragi, an engineer at Sony, secretly designed the sound chip for Nintendo's upcoming Super Famicom game console without the knowledge of his employer. Based on the success of this project, he was able to convince Sony CEO Norio Oga to take Nintendo up on their offer to collaborate on a CD add-on for the Super Famicom. As part of the deal, Sony would also be allowed to develop their own standalone console. In 1991 at the Chicago Consumer Electronics Show, Sony announced their PlayStation console, a CD-based system that was also fully compatible with the Super Famicom library. The business relationship with Nintendo broke down over licensing issues, and Sony was publicly embarrassed when, just one day after they announced the PlayStation, Nintendo announced that they would be partnering with Sony rival Philips to develop their CD peripheral. The vast majority of executives at Sony were ready to end their foray into the gaming hardware market, but Kutaragi, who would come to be known as the father of the PlayStation, was able to convince Oga, who felt humiliated by Nintendo, to continue developing the PlayStation and the next generation console.
Officially announced in 1994, the PlayStation as we now know it is a 32-bit system based around a 33 MHz RISC processor, has 3 megabytes of RAM, one of which is dedicated to video, has a color palette of 16.7 million colors, and can push up to 360,000 polygons around the screen per second. It was released in Japan on December 3rd, 1994, and in North America on September 9th, 1995. The PlayStation was one of the first consoles that did not come with a pack-in game as part of the standard package. If you bought your PlayStation at or near launch, you got this disc, PlayStation Picks, which featured 12 total games, 4 playable demos, and a sweet soundtrack by Tommy Tallarico. The highlight of the disc was a playable early version of Wipeout, which was missing the soundtrack for which it would later become known.
3, 2, 1, go!
At launch, the console cost $299. That's $100 cheaper than the Sega Saturn. But unlike the Saturn, you would also need to buy both a memory card and a game, which certainly helped bridge the price gap. But with 10 games to choose from on launch day, there was something to satisfy almost every type of gamer.
Traveling fighters brought together by a common destiny now meet at the Battle Arena Toshinden.
Battle Arena Toshinden was developed by Pamsoft, a developer better known for, well, nothing really. This fully 3D fighting game was clearly meant to take on Virtua Fighter, which was a pack-in game that then recently released the Saturn console.
You throw that little red thing out to do your special? To do your special?
I had that.
My mom bought that for us.
I had 1 and 2. I had that. Yeah, I had that. Yeah, I had that. Yeah, nigga, it had Super Delola that, nigga.
Very well
Yeah,
the red shit.
Yeah, stop playing, boy. That's the main card right there. Stop playing. I had this. I had this. That nigga don't know that I had this. It's just fire.
Toshinden was the first
Fire that shit. Look, it's fire. Look, you did it. You got Duke, nigga.
More so when you're
And they had
accustomed to playing 2D fighting games where
And they had
control precision is of the utmost importance.
Whoa.
While this game was very popular when it was released, I think it's safe to say that the majority of that praise was due to the game's wow factor, its ability to show off what the PlayStation was capable of, and more importantly, the consoles that gamers were used to playing were not capable of. If you bought a PlayStation at launch, or any console at launch for that matter, it's because you were looking for that next-gen experience. Battle Arena Toshinden may not objectively be a good game, but there's no denying that it gave gamers a taste of things to come on Sony's fledgling console.
I had to be like, yeah. I had to come in and go, that's people
Battle Arena Toshinden was next.
I had to do your PlayStation how I did
The Rising Project is a bundle disc featuring
Nobody gonna do PlayStation. The whole
developed by
everybody
Saibu Kaihatsu.
Everybody give me attention to who?
Rather than being arcade ROMs played by an emulation, these games are actually arcade purpose, at least in the arcade purpose with a little bit of script.
You ain't had Ratty at a night.
They're vertically oriented, meaning that they're displayed as 3-4 instead of 4-3, which presents a bit of a problem for home games on the PlayStation 2D. There are 3 screen modes available in the options menu that attempt to solve this problem. One shrinks the screen down to fit vertically, another stretches the first option out to make it even uglier, and the horizontal gives you a pixel-perfect view of the screen.
I already have my headset, right? Mo gave me some bread or whatever. We got Donnell headset. So me and Donnell took up the PS2 or whatever. We got like little girls from each other. And we playing SWAT, nigga. On a little ass screen. Together and doing command. They yo. Why? He gonna ruin. You feel me? So we gotta correct it. He do that thing. They need to remake all this shit.
It doesn't really work because they want you to play the game to go to a horizontal shooter instead of a vertical. Obviously, they were worried about the indigenous nature of American culture because they warned you about the dangers of rotating your TV. And it makes you press a button to waive your right to sue them if you ignore those warnings and break the TV anyway. Even if you do rotate, the controls aren't rotated, meaning you have to rotate the controller in your hand to play that way, which is horribly uncomfortable. The Japanese version of the game has a fourth display option, which rotates both the screen and the controls. Rather than remove this feature from the American release, they just got rid of the option to select the settings menu. Using this Game Start code, you can enable the display mode, allowing you to play the game the way the minute he plays.
I'm just gonna go.
The game is the case with most games of this nature. If you die, you lose all your power-ups. You play the game very defensively until you regain your strength. Rising is significantly easier than Rising 2, so it's probably best to master the first game before trying to tackle the second. Rising 2 also has improved visuals and adds a third weapon, a purple laser that turns into a solid beam that homes in on enemies if you tap the fire button faster. There's also an option of selecting remixed soundtracks for both games. While I don't have a problem with the original game music, the remixed versions sound nice and are a definite upgrade. This game received lukewarm reviews from critics who wondered why anyone would pay $300 for a next-gen game console and then use it to play arcade games that were 5 and 2 years old, respectively. But reading through old Usenet posts, I found that this game was very well received by gamers who were fans of the genre, and the Rising project was seen as a clear upgrade over the 1993 Jaguar release. This game is also probably the most sought-after title of the launch lineup, as it was the only arcade-perfect home port of Rising 2. Kill League the DNA Imperative is a corridor shooter that was developed by Japanese developer Genki, who, much like Camsoft, aren't really known for making anything else in North America.
The enemy is everywhere and attacks without warning.
Kill League was the only first-person shooter available at launch, and while it certainly looks better than any other console FPS that came out before it, it's entirely forgettable today. As was standard with games of this ilk, you wander around an illogically laid out building, upgrading your weapons, collecting key cards, and killing the occasional enemy. The game did a decent job of showing off the power of the PlayStation, and I'm sure had some wow factor to it back in the day, but unless you were really into the genre, Kill League was a weekend rental at best. Even the title is boring. Moving on. NBA Jam Tournament Edition has a number of things going for it. It's a nearly arcade-perfect port of a wildly successful arcade franchise. It was the only licensed sports title available at launch, and it was the only game compatible with the 4-player multi-tap available at launch. In the late 80s and 90s, Midway released a number of over-the-top arcade-style sports games that emphasized exaggerated, well, everything over simulation. But none was as successful as the NBA Jam series, which sold over 20,000 arcade cabs and generated over $2 billion in quarters. That's 8 billion quarters, which is more than the population of the Earth. It's a 2-on-2 basketball game featuring every team that was in the league at the time, and 3 players from each team, allowing for substitutions between periods. The gameplay is fast, the fouls non-existent, the physics totally unrealistic, and the announcer highly quotable. The game has a metric crap ton of cheat codes, too many to cover here, and there are a ton of hidden characters, including both then-President Bill Clinton and his wife, and DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. The Fresh! The Jazzy Jeff! Bill grabs the rebound! I really can't say enough good things about NBA Jam Tournament Edition. Not only does this game not require that you like basketball, it doesn't even require that you like sports. This is just arcade action at its finest, and was definitely worth buying at launch if you had a group of friends to play with. Power Surf 3D Tennis was the only PlayStation game developed by SPS to be released outside of Japan, and one of only 2 PlayStation games published by Ocean in North America. Thank God for that, because this game is terrible. Is that Rafael Nadal? No, that's a chick. I bet the graphics were pretty awesome back in the day, but it's all just eye candy. The problem with this game is in the gameplay. The control is sluggish and unresponsive, and you have to be standing in exactly the right spot to hit the ball. For all the time I spent playing Power Serve for this video, I scored a grand total of 3 points. The game has a doubles mode, but isn't compatible with the 4-player multi-tap. Seriously? At least then you and 3 of your friends could suffer together. Not worth buying, this game wasn't even worth renting. Moving on. Street Fighter the movie may be the only home video game that was based on an arcade game, that was based on a movie, that was based on an arcade game. It's also the only game that I know of featuring Kylie Minogue. This much maligned entry in the Street Fighter series features the entire cast of characters from the movie, which in turn is just the entire cast of characters from Super Street Fighter 2, except that Fei Long has been swapped out for some dude called Sawada. Instead of the colorful, cartoony graphics used in every other Street Fighter title, this one looks more like Mortal Kombat, using digitized video and stills from actors in the movie. Along with the standard arcade mode, there's also a movie battle option, which plays more like a story mode. I thought this was pretty neat as it ostensibly tries to follow the plot of the movie. The only downsides are the fact you have to play with Guile, since he was the main character, and it of course has little replay value. But as is the case with any Street Fighter game, the real meat and potatoes is the arcade mode anyway. While the game obviously looks quite different, I thought the gameplay felt about right. Oftentimes when a game is seen to be not up to snuff compared to its peers, you'll hear someone say that it's only for die-hard fans of the genre or franchise. I felt like with Street Fighter the movie, the opposite is true. This game just rubs Street Fighter purists the wrong way, but for a casual fan like me, I see it as a pleasant diversion of the series, and I enjoyed playing it quite a bit. Is this one of the best Street Fighter games ever made? Of course not. But it also doesn't deserve all the abuse that it takes. I'd still rather play this than any of the Mortal Kombat games ever made. ESPN Extreme Games is a combat racing game in the same vein as Road Rash. In fact, this game feels a lot like Road Rash, and at the risk of pissing some of you off, I think that Road Rash is one of the most overrated games of all time. Feel free to tell me how wrong I am in the comments section. ESPN Extreme Games lets you choose between 4 forms of locomotion: a mountain bike, rollerblades, a skateboard, and a street luge. And there'll be players using all 4 in any given race. On your mark, get set, go! The game also features multiple locales, including the streets of San Francisco, Lake Tahoe, the Italian countryside, somewhere in Utah that looks like Moab, and some jungly ruins in South America. The object of the game is to not only win the race, but to pass through as many gates as possible. Yellow gates earn you points which add to your season total. Blue gates open secret passages or clear obstacles, and green gates give you cash which you can use in between races to upgrade your gear. At the top of the screen you have a strength meter, which is drained when you push too hard while racing. A depleted race meter will not only slow you down, but will also make it easier for opponents to knock you to the pavement. This meter can be refilled by coasting without crashing. The real key to this game lies in fighting other players, and it is this aspect which must be mastered. Unlike the 16-bit Road Rash games, ESPN Extreme games take advantage of batch fellow racers. While it is best to avoid them when possible in order to keep their speed up, the other racers tend to be pretty aggro, and in this game, the best defense is a good offense. Although I definitely would not have considered buying this game back in the day, it would absolutely have been worth a weekend rental. As the game also features a 2-player split screen option, it would have been an awesome choice to get a friend or family visiting for the weekend. Total Eclipse Turbo was a port and slight upgrade of an early 1994 release on the 3DO simply called Total Eclipse. The game was developed by Crystal Dynamics, who is better known for their Gex series of games, which would later make their way to the PlayStation as well. Total Eclipse Turbo is split into 2 game modes. The first takes place on the surface of a planet and features height-mapped terrain reminiscent of Cybermorph on the Atari Jaguar. You fly along a predetermined linear path and are limited to a pretty narrow altitude range. Shoot as many enemies as you can while collecting power-ups and not dying. The other half of the game is what is called tunnel mode, wherein you fly through a tunnel avoiding obstacles, shooting enemies, and once again trying not to die. I'm sure that this game had some wow factor for anyone playing it in January of 1994 on the 3DO, and perhaps similarly so for those playing it at launch of the PlayStation. That being said, I can't say that I had any fun with it, as the controls were too sensitive, your ship lacks the ability to roll in the tunnel sections, and the game just plain isn't that fun. Once again, it clearly separates itself from games of the 16-bit era and shows off the 3D capabilities of the systems on which it was featured. But this one was a weekend rental at best, and really only if there was nothing else left on the shelf. Rayman was the only platform game released at launch, was released around the same time for both the PlayStation and Atari Jaguar, and was the first in a franchise of games that lives on to this day. Sony supposedly had a blanket policy about 2D games early in the PlayStation's lifespan, so either they started that sometime after the launch or Rayman slipped through the cracks. The first thing you'll notice about this game is its gorgeous graphics, as it takes excellent advantage of the PlayStation. Held up better than any other launch title for obvious reasons. Your job is to rescue all of your caged friends called Electoons in each area of the game. While Rayman may look like a cutesy platformer marketed towards kids, it gets really hard as you progress through the game, basically requiring you to memorize many of the levels. As you move through the game, Rayman picks up additional abilities, which allow you to revisit earlier levels and rescue trapped allies that were previously unreachable. If you have the patience to die repeatedly while learning how to properly traverse the later levels, Rayman can be a great game. While I never would have bought this one back in the day, it would have made an excellent weekend rental. If you're a fan of the genre, it is definitely a game worth checking out, either on the original PlayStation or via download on PSN or on the Nintendo DSi. We finally come to the 10th and final game. Ridge Racer from Namco was the standout title from the PlayStation launch, and I can almost guarantee that if I had bought this system on September 9th, I would have bought this game along with it. Ridge Racer is a port of Namco's 1993 arcade hit, and perfectly showed off the audio-visual capabilities of Sony's new console. The biggest complaint I hear about this game is that it really only has one track with multiple variations. That's a fair point, but go back and play just about any motor racing game from the 16-bit generation, and then tell me that you wouldn't rather play this instead. There are 4 cars to choose from, each with different characteristics, and initially there are 3 tracks, or track variations, on which to drive. More variations in the track are unlocked as you progress through the game. Once you've unlocked it, there's also a time trial race against a special black racing car, that requires near perfection to beat. Doing so will allow you to use that car in all subsequent races. I feel like people think this is a drift racing game, and perhaps the series did move in that direction down the road, no pun intended. But it actually relies on smooth driving, which is a challenge with digital control pad. If you start to drift, you're doing it wrong. Ridge Racer also had a mini-game programmed into the loading screen, allowing you to play a single board from their arcade classic Galaxian. If you clear the board before the aliens fly away, you actually unlock a bunch of hidden cars. While these cars offer nothing new in the performance department, they are all themed after classic Namco arcade titles, which makes them a neat Easter egg. Ridge Racer was not only the best game available at launch, but it's still quite playable today, and I spent more time playing this game than any other in preparation for this episode. It also went on to spawn a litany of sequels both on the PlayStation and beyond. That's going to do it for this episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly TV. If there are any games, consoles, or topics you'd like to see covered on the show, please let me know by leaving a comment below. And if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. When the Sony PlayStation launched in the late summer of 1995, although hotly anticipated, its success was far from a foregone conclusion. The Sony name was synonymous with high-quality home electronics, but its experience in the arena of video games was limited to third-party publishing, as well as an aborted collaboration with Nintendo to develop a CD add-on for their 16-bit hardware. But in 1993, Sony hardware engineer Ken Kutaragi began development of a standalone 32-bit CD-based console. Debuting in Japan in December of 1994 and in North America in September of the following year, the PlayStation was released into a crowded field of competitors and suffered from a lackluster lineup of launch titles. But the American arm of Sony Computer Entertainment intended to have 50 games on the shelf by Christmas, and at year's end,